And welcome back to Open Your Eyes. Now, if you're joining us right now, our first conversation is going to be with Ambassador Atallah Shabazz. Good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Again, it's wonderful to see you both.
And Ambassador Shabazz is the founder of the Pilgrimage Foundation, and she is going to be speaking to us today about wellness and work. This is a super important topic. And as we were speaking, just before the break, you were saying that it was an area of huge interest you found in Belize. So why did you decide that this was a topic that you wanted to tackle?
Because I live it, right? So we live it. It's not just a topic in Belize, it's who we are all over in the States, anywhere. It's just sometimes we are just in like a locomotive motion, tending to things, all of which matters, but if you don't put them in certain priority or seasonal or respiratory order, something gives away. And in life, we also have shortcomings and losses and things, and we still think we're supposed to perform an optimum. And you have to reboot. And when you get to be my age, for instance, and I'm in my 60s, and I still have a lot of passions, a lot of interests, a lot of focuses, none of which I want to omit.
Yes.
So in order to be effective, how do I go about fulfilling those things?
Yeah.
As it relates to Belize, I've been bringing delegations in for the whole duration of 17 years.
Yeah.
Part of that has always been a life balance, because the people we bring are not people who are just typical tourists. They're people whom I know could use what Belize offers, and that's a pace, that's an amour, that's a certain kind of grace, and an insight for people who travel, not to just go from the airport to a resort, but to engage. So we always do an interactive kind of coexistence. And so on the Belizean side I know all kinds of people in Belize, and they're not different from everyone else, but I don't want that. I'm a Caribbean person as well. And very often we're addressing the tourist needs without regard to the balance of all of the people that fit. So that's been exciting for me this time around. It's called wisdom, wellness, and work, because you had to figure it out first, right? and then how to know that you're entitled to that balance. And so we've chosen, as you saw on the schedule, locations in Belize that are familiar to others, but already incorporate a tourism citizen balance, right?
You noted that as ambassador at large, you have made a point of having different delegations come to Belize. Last year, you were working with Black men, and you were taking them kind of on a cultural exposure to help with their growth. Using that experience, how did you see the shift moving into focusing on this particular topic?
Well, in the United States, it's a reference in specifics because of what's happening to that young demographic, right? And I wanted them to get out of the box mindset. So again, being an international child growing up, I realized what it is in a local sense, and I understand what it is in a global sense. And that most of them had never left a zip code. And if they travel, they'll get to find their counterparts in other parts of the world. So these are young boys between 14 and 18 whose lives have changed forever since their visit to Belize. They felt a brethrenship. We've come back 3 more times with different composites of young people, most of them from the same co-ed, where in the States, when I said we're going to be doing some gardening, they thought it was dirt, but once they got here, they did the 4th and the 5th, and they called it soil. They understood that soil was the root for nurturing. So we incorporate a kind of social surrender in these experiences. So it's not just when you're an adult my age, but those kids also needed a balance of where they fit in the world and their aspirational selves. So it's been a success each time.
And moving to an environment like Belize, I mean, the two topics kind of fit, because it's teaching them a slower pace compared to what they probably see back home.
And one that they can be a part of. So that's usually the thing. It's the isolation, right? That usually makes people feel as if they're outside of the possibilities. And we incorporate the pace in which enables them to feel like they're citizens. And that's what they say all the time. It was so welcoming. They felt like everybody. people thought until they opened their mouth,
Yeah. Yeah.
people thought they were Belizean as well. And to be a natural welcomed person is sometimes not what people experience. And so over the years, this trip alone with Wisdom, Wellness, and Work, the response is definitely catapulting us into returning and doing a series next year. And we started with the Belize International Yoga Festival.
Yeah.
That was good for my delegation. And then we had a number of guests who were facilitators there. Then we went to Colby, which is a regular, it's where I've been for 16 years with the women and the youth.
What's that interaction like there? At Colby?
Programmatically, it's what's under my purview.
Yeah.
So we have developed things that have to do with life skills, and the things that you hear Colby talk about, but really engaging and supporting an entity that does not have a real revenue, but we, you have a capacity of people. We're all an act away from possibly being there ourselves. And when we're there, my delegation doesn't know what people are in for. So they get to just have the harmony of exchange, and it's always inspiring. Otherwise, I don't think we'd be there this long. And I meet them on the streets, and I see them other places. And then after Colby, we were at the Black Orchid Resort, where we were residing, and it was a wonderful atmospheric campus for us to merge and have Belizean professionals come in, but it was too short. So we're going to do a Friday night orientation, bunk in, and then wake up the next Saturday and everyone have the fellowships of different breakouts. And that'll be in the top of next year. And then we were in Hopkins Bay, and their in-house guests participated on the pier starting with the yoga and various things, utilizing a lot of your own citizens per their skills to be a part of it. Michelle Irvin was, right, powerful. Power. And she was excellent, as well as a number of our facilitators. And then we were also at the Belize Boutique Resort and Spa. And they talk about that. And we created a package, we're creating a package, starting with Mr. Murillo, who's already experienced it, for Belizeans, Belizean professionals, like a day pass, a 1-2 day pass, so that there's a respite that you can escape to, and that it's not just tailored to the visitor.
You said earlier that you live and have to find the ideal balance. I'm sure this didn't come naturally. There probably was a point in time where you said, listen, I need to, as much as I can motivate others, because you're a well sought after motivational speaker, I need to take care of me first. And that's perhaps the hardest transition for most people. If it's parenting and work, if it's community and work, shutting off that other outlet or pausing it for just a moment is really the hardest step.
And not feeling guilty. Not feeling guilty about it. I'm the eldest of 6. I have 5 younger sisters. So even though my sisters are in their 50s, I'm still their big sister, right? And so the call is never, how are you? It's just, it goes right into what they need.
This is what's happening to me.
And so I've always been a paced person by nature. And so I think that works in my favor to not rush into something. And I'm also one that doesn't do your work for you. I just support you in the direction you want to go in. So it's empowering you to know your right to the peace of mind. And the order, I can possibly see the order in which it dominoes and works for you. If you're having challenges at work, you still need the job. So you can't fret about the job. So we're going to talk about other ways in order to treat your 9 to 5 so that it does not chain you. It is actually working for you in one way or the other. And then identifying things. We had William Dawson with us, who was with the, he's the director of Wagner. And from the tightness, because there are losses, there are challenges, and he breathes all of those things. But by day 4, 5, 6, 7, by having the powwow and the exchange, and one morning he did the yoga when we were down in Hopkins. The second day he was missing, but we only found out that he was on the WhatsApp or the FaceTime with his wife doing it with her. Right? So any of those things, and they're entitling themselves to that as a family. And the 2 boys, his 2 sons, said, don't worry about it, we got it, Dad, we got Mom. So just permission, it takes one in a family, and sometimes it's tough because somebody's gonna have a bottom lip that you're leaving going or treating yourself to something, but it's essential.
Do you think we have to reach kind of a pivotal moment? Did you have that?
I've had a few, but again, my nature was always paced. My nature was always, my rearing was always about what I have I get to share. But I think I go through it at different times when I'm running on empty, and the older I get, my stamina or my bounce back is not the same. And then I have to reevaluate. But my intention is always the same. Once I'm restored, I'm already ready to get back. I mean, we were fatigued at the end of 16 people leaving, and I'm already thinking about my dates that I'm returning. You know, so and that's why it's turned into 17 years, and I have to thank Belize for that as well, for entrusting me, inviting me, and allowing us to participate, and to be able to curate these experiences on Belizean soil. So the access, the circumstances, the opportunities that we may have in the States just may move a little faster, but you have them here. The oasis is here, right? So the oasis is not just supposed to be packaged for the outsider. The oasis has to be packaged for the possessors of the culture, right?
Absolutely.
And re-entitle yourselves to that. You know, my grandmother didn't get to go back to Grenada. And when I go back and forth to Grenada, there's a little sadness that she didn't get to.
Didn't have that.
No, she didn't get to do that. So the being able to bridge the biculture, the triculture, the international, the global identities that people have, no matter what your geographic location is, that there's a harmony that we share, because we're not going to avoid the trials and tribulations. That's going to be part of life. The thing is that while that is here, how do we start to fill this up, identify this, so that when these hard knocks come, that we find a way to reach over to the other thing that we can exercise.
I actually kind of wanted to ask you about that, because I would imagine, of course, in your work, you over the years you hear so many different stories and different perspectives from people. So I was wondering if there were sort of common struggles, experiences that you would have heard or that you used to build upon, especially to bring to the wisdom, wellness, and work.
I think fatigue, self-doubt, where you fit in the world. I mean, you know, when you think administration by administration, season by season, generation by generation, but when you live long enough, you get to see that there really is an ebb and flow of the very same thing. So when elders used to say, "This soon shall pass," you're thinking when you're young, you don't get what I'm talking about, but it actually does. And so my thing is how to curb the learning capacity into one that works for you, and enabling people to get off the ledge, because I know a lot of people that have been on a ledge, on the edge, and presuming this is where it stops. And so the challenge for me is I'm a very porous person, so I could feel your edge, and to help work through that edge means I'm also absorbing it. So that's where I think my bigger challenge is how do I have a little Teflon, when it comes to that. But in order for me to convey from a real authentic place, I almost have to transmit where you are.
You have to absorb some of it.
I have to be right there.
And do you find that difficult? Like,
no.
Does it weigh on you at any time?
Both. I don't find it difficult because it is a natural part of what I'm able to do and convey. And I wouldn't be there if I didn't think that I can convey the value. The thing becomes what I do for myself to restore. You know, and you know, as I've said often, I'm by nature very reclusive, so I get to have that kind of inner solace. But that's where things like what Michelle Williams is teaching, and Jeremy Enriquez, and so many others, about this kind of power you have to run your life, your thoughts. You're walking with it every day. All of this is going to happen anyway. But how do you rebalance? How do you recalibrate your place? And then we give other information and experiences. And being able to choose Belizean locales owned by families is very exciting. We always do urban, suburban, and rural. And suburban for us has become Black Orchid Resort, because 14 years ago, I was able to take the kids from the YWCA there. And the Mr. and Mrs. Thompson were open door, open house. So I included it as my locations for programming even before I stayed there. And so we're going to do this. I think most Belizeans know Black Orchid.
Oh, yes. Yes,
right?
yeah.
And so it's a great campus for a 36-hour session.
You have the river, you feel like you're in a jungle setting, and
And
it's
they're
not too far off.
No, it's not too far. It's nearby. And to really curate the grounds in a way that maximizes all topographies of Belize.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned earlier that while in Belize we may have a different pace, because when we talk about the United States, for example, we always use the rat race as the example. And there's kind of a mindlessness that we can fall into, where you just, come day, go day, never really focus, and you're busy but not productive.
Yeah.
How do you reach that moment of transformation in just a couple days? And not only reach a point of transformation, but be able to go back into your respective environments. So when you get back on that hamster wheel, all the refocus and energy you've filled yourself with can be gone within minutes. Yeah.
Well, that is one of the things that even when I'm bringing in delegations, they don't just come in and play and party.
Yeah.
I do have one-on-ones with each of them as well. It's kind of life coaching, executive coaching, advisory with each one. Because it's an invitational. I don't just hit e-blasts and say, come with me to Belize. Yeah. It's really intentional.
Although these days that would be easy to get a crowd, right?
Yeah, but I can refer them, right? I can refer them. This is really intentional. People that I know would benefit from the atmosphere here. And then within them, part of the human service component of our intention is how they use their own expertise and share that with others. So it is very difficult. I'm in touch with them. I send notes to them. I think that's why we realized what was born out of both our experience at Black Orchid and Hopkins is, how do we do this again? Yeah. And this wasn't enough time. Yeah. And since I know I'm a mainstay in Belize, then we will do series. We'll continue doing series. I said to Mr. Murillo in their theater there, we will also do some kind of series in your theater atmosphere for your, we work with those who are residents there, but now let's do something with your professional staff, the 200 people that work at Colby, so that they can also have the balance, because they have a high stress life. So if my life in the next year, 2020 is my father's 95th birthday, and I've decided to dedicate it in a way that I did in his 85th year, which was a commitment in the spirit of humanity by any means necessary. Yeah. And that's all of the people I know that do the same kind of work different ways. So when you say, how do you maintain it? I don't have to do all of it, but I can moderate it. Yeah. I know who's good at it. Yeah. And we've already had people from the last week that are in touch with some of the facilitators to sustain certain aspects. Yeah.
Now, tell us a bit about the group that came for this first workshop.
Cross-section of professional advisors. And one thinks an advisor can is 24/7, but even those individuals need to restore, because by the time you reach your peak, you've gone through a lot of no's. And we've had one who was a prominent partner of Les Brown, who's but she, in the month of August, September, within a week's time, lost both her eldest sister and then her mother. So while she's in the world inspiring others, I knew she needed to be in a place before the Christmas break and pause. Yeah. But once she was signed on, I said, would you love to share? And she did. And she's great at it. Yeah. You had another young lady who was just in her 30s and from Detroit, Michigan, who has strategic partners. And that's where the corporate and the nonprofit find ways to work together so that you're not having to always stand in line for a grant. Yeah. Like where the twain meet. Yeah. Quentin Vinny, who was a keynote, he's the young brother from Baltimore who amidst a hard knock life up to 12 and then 25 and then 30, made different changes and really is the example of perpetual maintenance because, you know, it's not gone. Yeah. The challenges are not gone, but he was amazing with the youngsters at Wagner and every place.
So it seems that just amongst the group itself, there were some support systems there just with the strengths that they all brought.
that's what the intention is. So whenever I bring people, I know who needs, they're always amazing. People
Yeah.
are amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes I'm very much aware when I'm speaking to someone that they're going through something where they don't realize how fabulous they are. And I know when I get them away from the things that distract them, that we can get into a place in the oasis experience that I have in Belize, right?
Yeah.
Gets to be something I get to share, and they recalibrate. They always leave coming back. We have a lot of repeat offenders. Yeah.
You know, you talk about people not knowing their strengths. Isn't that a common theme
Yeah.
across the board? It's kind of
Across the
like
globe.
everyone has a part of imposter syndrome to a certain extent.
Or just trying to live up to, and you want to say, what does that measure? What do you measure? What's the illusion of that measure?
Yeah.
I had a father who did not put that on me. In being born first, he was my first friend.
Yeah.
And he was so unconditional. That's where the definition of unconditional, he was my first buddy and friend. And so that anything you did wrong was never wrong. It was something, an opportunity to learn from. My mother was a perfectionist, like most mothers. So if I came home with a 98
She's an
on my
educator.
test, yes, she was an educator, right? No,
Yeah.
and believe me, an educator. You know, so if you're looking for, I came home with a 98 one time, and she wanted to know, with all these encyclopedias and all this opportunity to study, what answer did you get wrong to lose that? Where my father celebrated the 98, and then we later got to talk about what was missing. And then he also was one of those that would say, oh, I think I made that mistake once. Just
You
leave it
had
at
a good balance just at home.
Oh, yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, but again, being born first gave me the
Yeah.
benefit of that, because my sisters didn't always some of them didn't get to meet my dad.
Yeah.
I have twin sisters who my mother was pregnant with.
Yeah.
But yes, I did have that. And my father comes from that open door process of innovative discovery. And my mother's was academic.
Yeah. And when you talk about living up to a standard, and not necessarily society standards, we set standards
Yes,
for ourselves.
right.
And I maintain that we are often our worst critics.
Right.
Your father has such a legacy. And as his daughter, when you go about and you are giving, whether it's a speech, writing a book, or just being present, does it ever reach a point where it becomes a bit of a burden? Like, I won't be able to maintain what the expectations
Oh, no.
are?
I don't do expectation from the outside. No. Because I think in knowing him, not presuming him, right? And having known him, he was a very gentle, easy, accessible person. So it was part of my first metronome of confidence came from a person who did not have assessment or judgment. Maybe in his head, but the way he guided as a parent, it was you're already all right from birth. Yeah. So the rest is learning.
Yeah.
You're supposed to skin your knee in order to know how to stand up straight next time, right? Simple as that. Awkwardness happens. You address it right as soon as it happens. Something happens, if you get it off, but if it haunts you, that's what debilitates you. It's you who debilitates you sometimes, And so I'm not saying it's easy. It is something that you have to be aware of, and when you're in a relationship with someone, is it something I said, and take ownership.
Yeah.
So I'm really quick at that. And I think because my father was always such a truth teller of each phase or stage, I did not ever have the example of having to tuck anything away. Privacy-wise, yes, but not shame.
Yeah. Yeah.
No shame.
And did you find that, like, that inner sense of, let's say, balance, confidence also, did it make you in a way want to share that, where you saw perhaps other people going through difficulties or whatever?
I think there was a natural component to that. Again, I was a very attentive big sister, and when you're first, you're kind of mommy's big girl and daddy's friend. So I got to see, and we were surrounded by the acquired aunts and uncles were all persons who were social servants, and you have to remember, my father lived only till 39, which means I was surrounded by a lot of young people, like today's millennials, who were committed people.
Yeah.
So
socially active.
Socially committed at a time when there was no guarantee.
Yeah.
This generation has, beats the drum on their rights because they ought to have them.
Yeah.
Then, you didn't know it was coming, but faith enabled you to believe that you had to stand for something. So growing up around Ali, who was 25, 26, I mean, we're talking about 22, 23, 25, young kid, he was a kid.
Yeah.
These were young people who were passionate. So I think that having been surrounded and having such a continuum of people with purpose, who stood for something, who died for that something, where our families are still cousins, so to speak. We're all kind of like sandbox, bathwater babies together. That's what we refer. And now 50s, 60s, we are each other's children's aunts and uncles. And we know the price that was paid. And we're pretty much dedicated to assuring that the next generation knows their rights to be that, have that.
And do you think that, I really like what you said earlier, talking about the younger generation feeling sort of that their rights ought to be guaranteed or that they deserve. So do you think that perhaps that feeling in young people is probably is because of the work that was done earlier, that because we've come so far, that people automatically think that it should be a given?
Well, that they think that it should be a given, and we somewhere in there, when we had all of those things, somewhere in the late 70s, we stopped hammering it. So there are two generations in there that feel entitled, and when it's taken, they feel robbed.
Yeah.
And some are aware that we dropped the ball somewhere. So that I also take not direct responsibility, but I know what happened. I knew that people don't realize that the civil rights movement, the struggle with all aches, pains, highs, and triumphs, started, if you start with Rosa Parks or Emmett Till, that's 1955. If you conclude at the Vietnam War, that's 1972. That's almost 20 years. That parents were concerned about their children out there, that people were struggling. So by the time we got a little break, people took a break. I know my mother did not want me to fill my sisters in on all the gloom. No, it was too painful. It was all you could do to have the break. Right? No one would have imagined that there would have been another 50 years of trying to sustain what was happening then.
And I'm so glad you said that, because that's one of the questions I really wanted to get your reflection on. When you look at society today and considering the very unique upbringing that you had, I never thought of it until you mentioned it, being around at such a young age, such socially active, socially aware and conscious people, and having
names we know now.
Yes,
right.
And what would have then been for you kind of just status quo. That's how people are. That's what we should do. And the entire world, we kind of just fell into this quiet period, and now we're just seeing sparks, and a lot of people are working to out these sparks very quickly. What is your reflection on where we are today? We're moving into a next decade, and there are a lot of challenges we have to overcome as a globe. Even in Belize, there are a lot of challenges we have to overcome here. What do you think in terms of helping to ignite the spark within people again? And for those who've already started, in keeping it growing into that wildfire?
I think the trauma, the political traumas, the outing of all kinds of things that are happening in the last couple of years are essential. I think they're happening at a time that you have to have 4 generations at one time. You have the great-grandparent, the grandparent, the parent, and the child. You have the 10-year-old and the 85-year-old who can see it at the same time. I said with a friend of mine that my generation, the young boomers, the last of us, were the ones that touched the civil rights movement. If you could be 55, that's an adult, you're 56, 57, you're not part of that cognizance. You can be today's grandparent and not have been part of that. So when our line is gone, it'll be mythical. So I think right now that all of this is happening, and make sure that we are all at the same dinner table, discussing the issue, seeing it. It's not for naught. There are people that have certain feelings, and it's truth. I don't have a problem with truth. The thing is, what do we do with it? How do we prepare one another? You have to see things as they are, and not even with a judgment. You just realize that's not my consideration, that's not my vote. It's just, it's information. It's how we prepare ourselves for the next thing. So all too often, we're working with an anti. When the anti rears its head, don't give it so much energy. What are the things that do fit? And where do I direct that focus and that energy? Because this will zap you, right?
But many argue that what we are lacking are dynamic leaders, like your father and like the people you grew up around, to kind of be not just honest, but that brave, honest person, because that's where it gets difficult.
So you have some young ones. You have Colin Kaepernick. Colin Powell, notwithstanding. But Colin Kaepernick, who is getting pushback.
Yeah.
So the thing becomes, for all the people that can speak on his behalf in private, where are they publicly so that a 32-year-old is not stranded?
Yeah.
Right? That's the thing. But the same thing in my childhood I watched happen with Muhammad Ali. He was 25 or so, enlisted to Vietnam, and some people did not want to touch it. So that 4 years dragged out. But principle and commitment is risky for some people. And so when you start to see that, you have to get out of their way, because that's dangerous if you're part of the commitment crowd, right? Because you don't need anyone to interfere with that. I would love to see people support young people so they exist. It's just that when they stand up at a time like this, amidst whatever the backdrop is, it makes other people feel uneasy. I'm not saying people have to live uneasy. I don't think that's the price everybody has to pay. But we have to figure out how the one who dares to stand up and represent, without, he didn't try to hurt anybody. He was just making a point of something that was very real and timely. It had nothing to do with the flag. It had nothing to do with patriotism. It had something to do with the inequities of life and death that seemed to surround the young men that looked like him. A fact. Right? And he's still there, and he also has a camp. He and his team of amazing, powerful, also young people, for the most part all under 40, and they go from city to city, and they round up anywhere between 350 and 450 kids, teenagers, and they do the Know Your Rights camp, of which I've been a part of. It is absolutely powerful. Basic rights, there are 10 points. And know my right to be healthy and to be educated, just basic rights that young people who are under 18 are hoping you stand for on their behalf, because they can't. But at the end of the day, it is such a food for thought stir that my statement to them is that you need to know your rights university, and parents need to be prepared, because when those kids go home, there's a snapback. So when you talk about what happens when you've gotten all that fuel, and so we've talked to him about Belize as well, you know, but as we know when we see on television and recorded, he's trying to figure out his young life where he deserves to be there. So where's the response to that? And I don't mean outcry negative towards the adversary, but where's the strength of positive support? So the adversary likes to enlist the fuel. The thing becomes, how do you see the side that advocates for the positive? Different muscle.
I want to also ask, I guess kind of just piggybacking off of Marlene's question, what are the features, I guess, of today's society and today's young people that are not only different perhaps from your generation and when you were growing up, but not only different but also positive, and that make you optimistic about the future, you know?
I remain optimistic. I live around inspired people. The thing becomes enabling them to not feel alone with that inspiration, right? So these gatherings that I do is so that people can find their kind of sibling circle of like-minded people, and because it's not always going to be the crowd, and one thing you're going to have to be okay with is a little bit of isolation. I mean, like I said, I always had people around, but in my thought process, I could be singular at any given time. So I am definitely optimistic, inspired, and in many settings on a regular basis where people know the best is forthcoming, and they moreover want to find out how they can be a part of assuring it.
And what are the like what sort of tools that people can use. I think, for example, one of the benefits that we have today is technology, and we can spread information quickly and get perspectives out there. So have you also sort of?
Well, I'm laughing because I'm one of the antiquated ones. We'll send you a note and put a stamp on it.
Yeah.
And I am also part of the network. While I understand the significance of technology, I'm still in the powwow, where we all kind of break bread and sing a song.
But he's building connections.
No, and so what happens after that is what happens in that kind of incubated space of innovation and passion that you then send out. That becomes very important because the technological aspect or the social media aspect is very powerful, as we can see.
Yes.
Right? For those who can't reach you in that space.
Yeah.
But I laugh because just in this time, people keep saying, "What's your WhatsApp number?" And I said, "What's what?"
No.
Yeah, I don't have one. So, I mean, I've heard of it before, but no, I know it's important. Somewhere in there.
I'm sure you have your means of communication.
I absolutely have but part of it has been when I lost my mother. When my mother was in the accident, we had so many phone calls that came in, like 40 at one time. And if I had started unloading my machine before someone reached me in the airport, that's how I found out my mother was in an accident. I would have been thrown off by the calls. It would have panicked me differently. So one weekend turned into a month, turned into a year, and I started to find, and then Belize entered my life, right? And in Belize, when I came in 2002, did not have all of this newfangled whatever. So I would be in the field, so to speak, away, and there was a solace that came. And so when you talk about how you preserve yourself, I choose the solace because as soon as I touch down, I'm going to be very busy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And what I'm hearing from you is kind of practical lessons that you've executed in maintaining with the topic we first started off of, your latest delegation that you brought.
Wisdom, wellness, and work.
Wisdom, wellness, and work.
Yeah.
The wellness aspect we didn't incorporate so much into the conversation. I know you had yoga sessions and mindfulness sessions.
As well as at the spa in Moscow. Yeah. And not just because of its atmosphere, but when the people got there, it's uninterrupted. Yeah. Right? And it's still amidst nature. It's submerged in nature. And we also had Mr. Mario, who's the very first Belizean professional beneficiary of the package, to just turn off the phone for a minute and treat yourself to something that you're entitled to before you go out there and battle the rest of the world. So wellness was definitely present. And Mr. Thompson did river tours where he was able to take people and experience silence. Yeah. And
you said the work part of the title is because it takes work to be able to get towards
because we have work to do. We live amidst work. We think work is first. We say family. We think we know how to intellectualize the order of priorities.
Or we say what's socially acceptable.
But we do work first. We do work first, and we hope our family is intact. And we have to figure out the balance of that because work does end at 5 o'clock, or figuratively. Work is on the other side, but we take work with us. What part of you is left in the parking lot, and what part do you pick up when you go back home? When you put the key in your own door, are you taking work with you, or are you present with your family?
Just to tag on there, when we think of society today, and if we want to be inclusive, there's some people who work almost all day. And not because they're so tied to it, or they build their identity around it, or they like it, but sometimes it's because it's a means of survival. They have children to feed, they have responsibilities to maintain, and so they would hear the idea of finding balance or saying no to something.
A challenge.
Yeah.
No, and we all do.
Almost far-fetched, like impossible.
But we all do. Whether you have a job where you think you have no out, or whether you're an executive. I mean, a lot of people feel as if I lose this job, I have no life. That's the problem. Yeah. You have to shift it and be willing to say there are other aspects of my life that have significance and balance. And that's when I said to you earlier, you can't always leave that job. Yeah. So we work with you on ways to balance who you are in the context to that job, so it doesn't take over. It doesn't become your 100%. right? It becomes a viable part for you to determine your 100%. And if that's family or self or aspiration or dream, but you have to do well, so that it works for you.
So you said that the workshop was too short to really get as much information as possible.
Told. No,
And we are trying to get so much out of you in this even shorter time. But I will ask you just this one question. If you were to tell people, based on your own life experience and even from the recent retreat, what's one tool to perhaps, because we spoke of it before, one, it's giving yourself permission and relinquishing the guilt that comes with it. But beyond that, what's one tool that can move you in the right direction that maybe you're not going to have equally balanced scales, but you're going to undo some of the burden from one side?
So in the marrow of our existence, there was always a wish when you were a little person that is still there, right? So sometimes you have to get quiet enough to recover or discover what that is. And it's hard when you have so many layers of life and responsibilities and distractions, period. So without violating people's confidences, confidentialities, I don't do that. I would be speaking to you alone to hear it so that you can trust me to surrender what that is. So that nobody around you that says, bad idea, not a good one. Those are the things that interfere, and then speak to you separately. And then ignite what's already there. So I'm able to assist you in finding that. And from the big side, it really is just to know that we all really do have an intention and a purpose. Sounds grand, but how do we discover what that is or rediscover what that is? And I know for me, at this rewirement stage, not retirement, I'm jotting down a lot of things on paper and crossing things out. So the discovery is not found and stayed. It's pliable, it moves, and it's okay to discover or travel with what that variable is. You just got to open your eyes, so to speak.
And we love when travel do that.
Well, and claim it, right? Because we have to know that.
Well, we close with open our eyes and mind and hearts.
And then, as my father would always say, may we meet again in the light of understanding by any means necessary.
All right. And what a beautiful way to close off this conversation. We know you've had a packed schedule in Belize. We appreciate you taking the time to stop in, not just chat with us, but all Belizeans who are watching. And we look forward to your return.
My pleasure. We're looking forward to it, and we hope to have more and more people. There's no one answer. But just discovering what that process is.
And we can look forward to the next retreat as well, which should be held next year. And
early.
And so people can perhaps look into participating there as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you both.
We're going to go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we'll be talking about the launch of a brand new program. It's called My Brother's Keeper. That's coming up after the break.